Chapter 5, Daisy Dawson. Mission Impossible. "Dad," whispered Daisy when her father had covered her with the duvet and kissed her goodnight, "do you believe that animals can talk?" He stopped in the doorway and turned back to look at her. "Of course," he said. "Really?" said Daisy. "Yes, I'm sure they can, at least in their own way. Otherwise, how would rabbits warn each other that a fox was coming? Or a bee tell its friends about a field full of flowers?" "Oh," said Daisy. "I hadn't thought of that. Of course," her father went on, "the really interesting thing would be if we could understand what they were saying." He chuckled. "That would be something, wouldn't it?" "Yes," Daisy whispered as he turned out the light. "It certainly would." At first, she wasn't sure what had woken her. The moonlight traced silver patterns across the floorboards, and as she rubbed her eyes, Daisy heard a faint tap, tap, tapping at the window. Cautiously, she pulled back the curtains and was surprised to see a little grey squirrel sitting on the ledge. It waved when it saw her and pointed at the window catch. Daisy quickly opened the window and the squirrel jumped down onto her bed. "Greetings," it said in a small posh voice. "I am here on a top secret mission." It beckoned her closer, put a paw up to its mouth and whispered, "No one must know of my existence." "How exciting," said Daisy, trying to look serious. "Are you a spy?" "Maybe I am," replied the squirrel, "and maybe I'm not." He looked slowly left and right, as though checking that no one was listening, then whispered, "The blue donkey is under the mattress." Daisy leant over the side of her bed and peered beneath it. "Really?" she asked. "Are you sure?" "No, no, no, no," replied the squirrel, exasperation creeping into his voice. He cupped both paws around his mouth again and said in a loud whisper, "The blue donkey is under the mattress." Daisy shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I haven't got the faintest idea what you're talking about." He dropped his paws and sighed heavily. "It's a secret code," he explained. "Trouble is, I'm the only one who understands it." "Never mind," said Daisy brightly. "How about you tell me in ordinary language?" "Okay," he said. "We found Boom. We know where he is." said Daisy, picking him up and kissing him on the tip of her nose. "That's wonderful, Mr. Squirrel." "Oh, well, it was nothing really. Call me Cyril," he said, blushing in a way that only squirrels can. "Cyril?" asked Daisy, placing him gently down on the duvet. "Cyril the squirrel?" "Yes," he replied. "Blame my mother. Lovely lady, but partial to a rhyme." "So, tell me," Daisy went on, "where did you find Boom?" "Well, that's the problem," said Cyril. "At the moment, he's locked up in temporary kennels on the outskirts of town, run by some crazy lady, apparently. But they're going to move him to the big city kennels in the morning, and once they've done that, we won't have a hope of rescuing him." Cyril's voice dropped. "We have to get him out tonight." "Tonight?" whispered Daisy excitedly. "But how?" "Well," said the squirrel, eyeing Daisy's pyjamas disdainfully, "getting dressed would be a start." A few minutes later, Daisy clicked the front door shut behind her and followed Cyril down the driveway. As they turned the corner, she saw Meadowsweet waiting beneath a street lamp. "Well done, Cyril," said the old mare, bending her head down towards Daisy. "Climb aboard, Daisy. We must move quickly." Daisy clambered up onto Meadowsweet's back, the moon shining silver above the chimney pots. Cyril scrambled onto her shoulder and they were off, the squirrel calling out directions as they galloped across the moonlit fields, the cool night air blowing softly in their faces. After about 20 minutes, they came to a white farmhouse on the edge of a wood. Behind it was a high wooden fence with a sign that said, Crack down kennels. Keep out. Are you sure this is it? Asked Daisy. Absolutely, said Squirrel. I've got a couple of pigeons and some mice to case the joint this afternoon. Cost me a few acorns, but if you want good information, you've got to pay for it these days. We think Boom's the only one in there at the moment, explained Meadowsweet. The other dogs were moved out last week. OK, said Cyril, perching on Meadowsweet's head. Here's the plan. On the other side of that fence is a row of metal cages. Boom's kennel is inside cage number 7. But the cages are locked and the keys are kept by the fierce old bat who owns the place. But where does she keep them? Asked Daisy. On her bedside table, replied Cyril. Daisy chewed her lip. That's not so good. Ah, but that's where you come in, he explained. I nip through the cat flap and unlatch the door. You come upstairs, open the bedroom door for me, and I sneak in and swipe the keys. We'll be in and out before she's even got time to grab her baseball bat. Baseball bat? Repeated Daisy nervously. Did you say baseball bat? Don't worry, said Cyril. She couldn't hit a home run if you bowled her a watermelon. Daisy took a deep breath. OK then, I suppose we'd better get on with it. That's the spirit, says Cyril, leaping up onto the fence. Who dares wins. As he disappeared over the top, Daisy stood on Meadowsweet's back, hooked her fingers over the fence and pulled herself up. She jumped down, nearly squashing Cyril flat. He rolled out of the way just in time. Hey, he squeaked, I'm on your side, remember? The house was in darkness as they approached, and Cyril slipped quietly through the cat flap. A few seconds later, he reappeared with a key in his mouth, and Daisy quickly opened the front door. Standing in darkness at the bottom of the stairs, she felt her fingers tingle with a mixture of excitement and fear. Come on, said Cyril, scampering upstairs towards the bedroom. The house smelled of old carpets and decaying flowers. Daisy stopped and held her breath every time a stair creaked. But at last she reached the bedroom door where Cyril was tapping his foot and beckoning impatiently to her. This is it, he whispered. You open the door, I'll grab the keys and then whoosh, we're out of here. OK, Daisy whispered back, but be careful. She twisted the doorknob and the door creaked open. Over on the bed, a large mound rose and fell beneath the duvet, accompanied by loud snores and wheezes. Look, said Cyril. What do you reckon? Daisy followed his gaze to the bedside table and, trying to ignore the baseball bat propped up against it, saw a small lamp, a glass of water and a bunch of keys. Bingo, she whispered. Go for it, Cyril. Cyril ran around the edge of the bed and jumped neatly up onto the table. Unfortunately for him, the tabletop had been waxed and polished that very morning, and now it was as slippery as an ice rink. Daisy saw the look of horror on his face as he pirouetted unsteadily across the surface before colliding with the table lamp and knocking the glass onto the floor with a crash. For a few short moments, time seemed to stand still. Then a large, ruddy-faced woman rose up from the duvet and began to scream so loudly that Daisy jumped backwards and bumped her head against the doorframe. It's a rat! Screeched the woman, pointing a thick, stubby finger at Cyril as he stood transfixed amongst the wreckage of the table. I'm being attacked by a filthy rat! As she sprang out of bed with a heavy thud, Cyril came to his senses and shot out of the bedroom like a stone from a catapult. Leg it, Daisy, he squeaked, rocketing past. She's after us. Daisy turned and began leaping down the stairs, 3 at a time. Did you hear that? Yelled Cyril as they burst through the back door and ran towards the kennels. She called me a rat. Never mind that, said Daisy. They skidded to a halt in front of cage number 7. Where are the keys? Cyril looked at her awkwardly. I might have dropped them at the top of the stairs, he said. I sort of didn't want to get clobbered. Brilliant, said Daisy. They looked round to see the kennel owner standing at the back door, brandishing the baseball bat over her head. "Where are you, you sneaky rat?" she shrieked. Come on out, or I'll whack you with my walloper." "Quick, Cyril," urged Daisy, crouching next to the kennels. "What's plan B?" She put her hand against the wire of the cage to steady herself, but the door swung open and she fell forwards onto her hands and knees. "Cyril," she whispered, "look, it's open." Cyril squeaked in surprise and disappeared into the cage. Daisy glanced back to see the large figure of the kennel owner walking slowly across the grass towards them, clutching the baseball bat firmly in her right hand. "Cyril," Daisy called nervously. "She's coming." The squirrel emerged from the gloom, shaking his head. "This is not going quite as planned," he whispered. "There's no sign of him." "Hey, there you are," shouted the woman. "Go with the rat." Cyril looked up at Daisy with a pained expression. "What is it with this rat thing?" he asked. "Cyril," said Daisy, "she looks pretty angry. What are we going to do?" Cyril watched calmly as the woman stomped towards them. "Emergency tactics," he said. "I'll create a diversion and you make a break for it over the fence." "But she might whack you," Daisy protested, cowering back against the cage. "With her walloper." "You forget," said Cyril loftily, "that she is a mere civilian, whereas I am a highly trained squirrel operative. The poor woman doesn't stand a chance." And before Daisy had time to answer, he ran off at top speed towards the grass. There was a sudden swishing noise, and Cyril leapt high into the air with a cry of "Hi-ya!" holding his paws like a tiny ninja warrior as the baseball bat swept harmlessly beneath him. Eyes narrowed, he made small, high-pitched squeaks, jumping deftly out the way as hapless kennel owner took more swipes at him. "Go, Daisy!" he shouted. "Run for it!" But as Daisy reached the fence, a booming voice stopped her in her tracks. "And where do you think you're going?" The red-faced woman was marching straight towards her. "You stay right where you are, young lady." Stretching up on tiptoe, Daisy tried desperately to reach the top of the fence, but it was too high. Her fingers scrabbled uselessly against the wood as two strong hands grabbed her. "Ha-ha!" cried the woman triumphantly. "Now I've got you." Shaking with fear, Daisy leant her forehead against the fence and called, "Meadowsweet, please help me." The next moment there was a thundering of hooves and Meadowsweet sailed over the fence to land beside Daisy with an earth-shaking thump. The woman's mouth fell open in amazement and she sank to the ground with her hands clamped firmly over her eyes. "It's a bad dream, Beatrice," she mumbled to herself, shaking her head and rubbing her eyes. "You're having a bad dream. That's all. Dancing rats and flying horses indeed. Just count up to 10 and it'll all be over. 1, 2... Meadowsweet tossed her mane, called, "Climb aboard, brave soldiers," and before Daisy knew it, they had leapt back over the fence and were galloping away through the silent woods and moonlit fields, back towards home. As Daisy opened the gate to let Meadowsweet into her field, she saw that Cyril looked sad and angry with himself. "Mission most definitely not accomplished," he said miserably. "Now we'll never see Boom again." "It's not your fault," said Daisy. "You did everything you could." "But it wasn't enough, was it?" Cyril cried bitterly. "It wasn't enough." "Oh, please," said a sharp voice from somewhere in the shadows. "I've already had enough of that dog whining all night. Don't make me listen to the squirrel as well." Peering into the darkness, Daisy could see the green eyes of Trixie McDixie staring at them from beneath the horse trough. "For your information," replied Cyril icily, "that dog, as you call him, has been taken away from us forever. But I don't suppose you care about that, do you? I bet you're not even the slightest bit worried." You're right, said Trixie, carelessly licking her paw with her pink tongue. I'm not worried at all. Trixie, Meadowsweet scolded, you should be ashamed of yourself. The cat stopped for a moment and twitched her whiskers in surprise. Oh, she said, do you really think so? Then she padded out from beneath the horse trough and called huskily, what about you, Boom? Do you think I should be ashamed of myself? Cyril frowned and looked at Daisy. Daisy looked at Meadowsweet. All three of them stared at the old barn. Slowly, a large bloodhound emerged with the somewhat bewildered look of a dog who was still half asleep. Daisy flung her arms around his neck and cried, oh, Boom, you're safe, you're safe. Well, duh, said Trixie. Meadowsweet stamped and whinnied with joy, but Cyril was flummoxed. I don't get it, he said. The mice told me the keys were in the bedroom. I even picked them up, so how did Boom escape? That, replied Trixie disdainfully, is the trouble with mice. They may taste good, but they know nothing about modern security systems. She pushed a small rectangle of plastic towards Cyril, who sniffed it and shrugged. What's this? This, my friend, is the key to the new electronic locks the kennel owner had fitted last week. The old keys you picked up were completely useless. I got chatting to the tomcat who lives there, and he told me about this swipe card which opens all the kennels. So while she was out shopping this afternoon, I slipped in through the cat flap, took the card off the table and gave the daft dog his freedom back. But how did you get him over the fence? Asked Cyril. No need, said Trixie. Royston Rabbit owed me a favour or two, so after dinner last night I got him and his boys to dig a bit of a hole around the back. Nothing fancy, mind you, just big enough to let an old hound squeeze through. Cyril stared at Trixie for a long time and then shook his head in disbelief. Do you mean to tell me, he said, that while we were out risking our lives this evening, you and Boom were back here relaxing? Well, I wouldn't exactly call it relaxing, replied Trixie. That dog snores like a sick horse. Screwing his paws up into an angry little fist, Cyril jumped up and down and squeaked, why on earth didn't you tell us before? Trixie shrugged. Because, my dear squirrel, you never asked. Cyril stamped his foot, scowled furiously and scampered up a nearby tree trunk in a major huff. Well, said Meadowsweet as Daisy hugged Boom and Cyril sat sulking on a branch of the old oak, I have to say, Trixie, you certainly showed us the way to do it this time. Trixie stared coolly at Meadowsweet for a long moment, her eyes glowing green in the moonlight. So, what's new? She purred, and with that she turned her back and slunk off into the shadows. So that's exciting. Boom is back. The rescue mission didn't quite go to plan, but at least Boom's home again. So I think we've only got one more chapter left of our Daisy Dawson book. Yep, one more chapter. So join me later this week for that chapter. And in the meantime, get busy writing your Daisy Dawson stories because I can't wait to see them. When you've written them, you can get your parents to type them up and email them to us. That would be fantastic. Or you could do a little video and email a video of you reading your stories to us. That would be brilliant. Anyway, take care. See you soon. Bye.